Maya Thompson had spent 3 years building her reputation at Vantage Dynamics. 3 years of arriving before sunrise. 3 years of fixing problems nobody else wanted. 3 years of carrying projects that somehow became successful only after other people attached their names to them. She told herself it was worth it because talent always won in the end. That belief kept her moving. Until the morning everything collapsed. The invitation arrived at 7:12 a.m. Executive Leadership Recognition Ceremony. Maya smiled when she saw it. The company rarely celebrated employees publicly. When they did, it usually meant a promotion was coming. Her latest project had transformed the company's struggling analytics division into its most profitable department. The numbers spoke for themselves. For weeks, co-workers had hinted she was about to become director. Even people outside her team expected it. For the first time in years, Maya allowed herself to feel excited. She spent extra time getting ready. Her navy suit was perfectly pressed. Her presentation notes sat neatly inside her leather folder. She even called her mother. "You sound happy," her mother said. "I think today changes everything. You earned it." I know, Maya believed it. At 10 o'clock, employees filled the auditorium. The CEO stood on stage smiling. Department heads occupied the front row. Large screens displayed company achievements from the past year. Maya noticed several photographs from her project. Every image made her confidence grow. Then she saw Richard Kane, her direct supervisor, vice president, polished smile, expensive watch, perfectly tailored suit. The man who had spent years taking credit for other people's work. Maya never trusted him. Richard had a talent for sounding supportive while quietly positioning himself above everyone around him. Still, she assumed today had nothing to do with him. The ceremony began. Awards were announced. Applause filled the room. Finally, the CEO stepped forward. "And now," he said, "our most significant achievement this year." A slide appeared behind him. The title was familiar. Too familiar. It was Maya's project. Every detail, every metric, every strategy, every breakthrough. Her heart pounded. The CEO smiled broadly. This innovation changed our company. Employees cheered. Maya prepared to stand. Then the CEO continued. "I want everyone to recognize the visionary leadership behind this success." Richard Kane rose from his seat. The auditorium erupted. Maya froze. For a moment, she thought she had misunderstood. Surely there was another acknowledgement coming. Surely someone would mention the woman who had actually built the project. Instead, slide after slide appeared. Each one credited Richard. Photographs, quotes, achievements. Every accomplishment she had earned now belonged to him. Laughter and applause echoed around the room. Maya felt heat rush into her face. She looked toward the executive row. Nobody seemed uncomfortable. Nobody looked surprised. They believed it. They genuinely believed Richard was responsible. Then things became worse. Richard walked to the microphone. "I'd like to thank my team," he said. The giant screen displayed a photograph. Maya's photograph. The room turned toward her. Relief flickered through her chest. At least she would be acknowledged. Richard smiled. "This young analyst worked hard supporting my vision." The crowd applauded politely. Supporting. Not leading. Not creating. Supporting. A few employees exchanged looks. Maya saw sympathy in their eyes. They knew. Everyone knew. Yet nobody spoke. Richard continued. "Without guidance, talent can become directionless. Fortunately, I was able to mentor this project into success." Laughter spread through the audience. Not cruel laughter. Worse. Comfortable laughter. The kind people shared when they accepted a lie because it benefited them. Maya felt humiliated. Every sacrifice, every late night, every weekend, reduced to a joke. The CEO handed Richard a crystal award. Photographers captured the moment. The room stood in applause. Maya remained seated. Her hands trembled. She realized something important. This was not an accident. It had been planned. The invitation, the presentation, the photographs, the speech. Someone had intentionally arranged the entire event. Someone wanted her sitting in the audience while another person accepted her achievement. Someone wanted her to watch. When the ceremony ended, employees approached Richard. Congratulations echoed everywhere. Maya quietly walked toward the exit. "Leaving already?" She turned. Richard stood behind her, still smiling, still holding the award. "You should be proud," he said. "Proud? You contributed. I built that project." Richard's smile never moved. Perception matters more than reality. For several seconds she stared at him. Then she understood. He was not even hiding it. He knew exactly what he had done. "You stole it?" "No." His voice remained calm. "I positioned myself better. You're admitting it. I'm advising you." He leaned closer. "This company rewards influence, not effort." Maya felt anger rising. "You think this ends here?" Richard chuckled. It ended the moment the board believed me. Then he walked away. Maya stood motionless. For the first time in her professional life, she considered quitting. Not tomorrow. Immediately. She could leave. Start somewhere else. Forget the entire company. Forget Richard. Forget the humiliation. But another feeling emerged. A colder feeling. A sharper one. She wanted the truth exposed, not because of pride. Because Richard would continue doing this forever if nobody stopped him. That evening, she opened her laptop. At first, she intended to gather evidence proving the project belonged to her. Instead, she discovered something strange. Several files had disappeared. Access logs had been modified. Internal records no longer reflected the original development timeline. Someone had rewritten history. Maya stared at the screen. This was bigger than credit theft. Richard had anticipated scrutiny. He had covered his tracks. She spent hours digging through archived communications. Most were gone, but not all. A forgotten backup server still contained fragments of old project records. Maya downloaded everything: emails, drafts, meeting notes, version histories. The evidence existed, scattered, incomplete, but real. By midnight, she had enough to prove she led the project. Unfortunately, proving it internally would accomplish little. Richard controlled the narrative. He had executive support. She needed something stronger. The next day, she met with an old friend, Ethan Brooks, former cybersecurity specialist, former employee of Vantage Dynamics, former victim of Richard Kane. When Maya explained what happened, Ethan laughed bitterly. Still doing it. You knew he took my work too. Why didn't you fight? I did. Ethan leaned back. I lost. Maya frowned. What do you mean? I submitted evidence, and human resources buried it. Why? Richard generated money. The answer sickened her. Ethan watched her carefully. You're planning something. I'm planning to expose him. You'll need more than project files. Then help me. Silence filled the room. Finally, Ethan nodded. I always hoped someone would finish what I started. Over the next 2 weeks, they worked quietly. Maya continued appearing at the office. She smiled during meetings, answered emails, delivered reports. Richard assumed she had accepted defeat. That assumption became his first mistake. Every evening, she met Ethan. Together, they reconstructed years of hidden misconduct. Patterns emerged. Employees whose careers mysteriously stalled. Innovations reassigned to executives. Performance records altered. Promotions manipulated. Richard had built his reputation by harvesting the work of others. The deeper they looked, the uglier it became. One night, Ethan uncovered financial irregularities. Consulting payments routed through shell companies. Contracts approved without oversight. Money flowing into places it should never have reached. Maya stared at the spreadsheets. This isn't unethical. No, Ethan's expression darkened. It may be criminal. For the first time, Richard seemed vulnerable, yet exposing him remained difficult. They needed proof connecting him directly. Without that, everything would become allegations. Weeks passed. Then an unexpected opportunity arrived. The company announced a global investor summit. Major shareholders would attend. Board members would attend. Media representatives would attend. Richard would deliver the keynote presentation. The same presentation built around Maya's stolen project. She immediately understood. This was the moment. If Richard succeeded, his influence would become untouchable. If he failed publicly, everything could change. 3 days before the summit, Maya received a message from an unknown number. Meet me. I have information about Richard Kane. The text included an address. No name, no explanation. Just a location. Ethan insisted it was risky. Maya went anyway. The address led to a small cafe across town. A woman sat alone near the window, mid-50s, professional appearance, sharp eyes. She introduced herself as Helen Foster, former board member. Maya nearly dropped her coffee. Former? Helen nodded. I resigned last year. Why, Richard? Maya leaned forward. Helen lowered her voice. I warned the board about him. What happened? They ignored me. Did you have evidence? Not enough. Helen slid a folder across the table. I do now. Maya opened it. Her pulse accelerated. Bank records, private communications, signed approvals. Everything connected. Richard's name appeared repeatedly. The folder represented years of hidden activity. Why give this to me? Helen smiled sadly. Because he underestimated the people he hurt. Maya realized she was not alone. Richard had created enemies everywhere. He simply assumed they lacked the courage to unite. Helen pointed toward the documents. The summit is your chance. Will this be enough? It depends. On what? Whether people see it before Richard can bury it. That night, Maya barely slept. The evidence was powerful. Maybe powerful enough to destroy a career. Maybe powerful enough to trigger investigations. Yet she understood the danger. If Richard learned what she possessed, he would strike first. The following morning confirmed her fears. She arrived at work to discover her company accounts suspended. Security escorted her from the building. No explanation, no warning. Just termination paperwork waiting at reception. Richard stood nearby watching. The smug expression on his face told her everything. He knew, maybe not the details, but he sensed a threat. "You should have moved on," he said quietly. Maya accepted the envelope. "You're scared." Richard laughed. "Of you?" "Yes." For the first time, his smile weakened, only slightly, but enough. "Goodbye, Maya." She met his eyes. "No." Her voice remained steady. "See you at the summit." Something flickered behind his confidence. A crack, a tiny fracture. Richard understood she was not defeated. And for the first time since the ceremony, Maya felt certain of one thing. The man who had arranged her public humiliation had no idea what was coming next. The summit was 48 hours away, and the revenge she had spent weeks building was finally ready. 48 hours later, the Grand Meridian Hotel buzzed with the energy of money, influence, and ambition. Executives moved through marble hallways carrying tablets and presentation folders. Investors greeted one another with practiced smiles. Journalists prepared cameras. Every major decision-maker connected to Vantage Dynamics seemed to be present. Richard Kane loved rooms like this. Rooms where reputation mattered more than truth. Rooms where confidence could become currency. He stood backstage adjusting his tie while assistants hurried around him. The keynote presentation was less than 30 minutes away. If everything went according to plan, the summit would cement his position as the company's next chief operating officer. The board had already begun discussing succession plans. His future had never looked brighter. Unfortunately for him, Maya Thompson had arrived before sunrise. She sat in a private conference room several floors above the main ballroom. Ethan Brooks occupied one chair. Helen Foster occupied another. Across from them sat two federal investigators and a forensic accountant. The evidence covered the table: printed emails, financial records, access logs, internal communications, transaction histories. Months earlier, none of those people would have listened to Maya. Now they listened carefully, because every document supported the next. Every record confirmed a pattern. Every pattern pointed toward Richard. The investigators spent nearly an hour reviewing the material. Finally, one of them looked up. "Where did you obtain this?" "Archive Company Systems," Maya answered. "Is there more?" "Yes." "How much more?" Ethan smiled. "Enough to keep your office busy for a long time." The investigators exchanged glances. That was usually a good sign. Maya leaned forward. "What happens now?" The older investigator closed the folder. "Now we verify everything. And Richard, we don't move until we're certain." Maya had expected that answer. She simply wished certainty moved faster. The summit schedule showed Richard speaking at noon. The investigators needed time. Unfortunately, time favored Richard. At 11:30, the ballroom filled completely. Nearly 1,000 people occupied seats. Additional viewers watched online. The company logo illuminated enormous screens. Maya entered quietly through a side entrance. Nobody stopped her. Most employees assumed she was still part of the organization. Others barely recognized her. She sat near the rear. Ethan took a seat beside her. Neither spoke. At precisely noon, the lights dimmed. Music echoed through the room. The master of ceremonies welcomed everyone. Then he announced Richard Kane. Thunderous applause erupted. Richard walked onto the stage looking every bit the successful executive. Confident, controlled, admired. Maya watched the audience rise to its feet. The same thing had happened during the recognition ceremony. The same admiration, the same illusion. The difference was that today she carried the truth. Richard began speaking. "Leadership is about vision." The audience nodded. "Success requires courage." More applause. "Progress belongs to those willing to innovate." The giant screens displayed project achievements. Her achievements. Again. Richard continued weaving a narrative that portrayed himself as the architect of every breakthrough. Every sentence built his legend. Every slide strengthened the lie. For a while, Maya simply observed. She noticed board members smiling, investors taking notes, journalists recording every word. Richard believed he was winning. Then her phone vibrated. A message from one of the investigators. Verification complete. Proceeding. Maya stared at the screen. Her pulse accelerated. The moment had arrived. On stage, Richard reached the climax of his presentation. Because of these innovations, Vantage Dynamics enters its strongest era in company history. Applause exploded. Then something unexpected happened. The giant screen suddenly went black. At first, nobody reacted. Technical issues happened all the time. Richard smiled patiently. The screens remained dark. Several technicians exchanged confused looks. A few seconds later, new images appeared. Not company branding, not presentation slides, documents, emails, financial records. The ballroom fell silent. Richard froze. The first document displayed an internal communication, his name highlighted, his approval attached. The second document appeared, then a third, then a fourth. Transaction histories followed, contract approvals, payment authorizations, offshore transfers. The room transformed from celebration to confusion. Richard stepped toward the technical team. "What is this?" No one answered, because nobody backstage controlled the screens anymore. Federal investigators did. A voice echoed through the sound system. "Calm, professional. Please remain seated." Every head turned. Several investigators entered the ballroom. The audience erupted into whispers. Richard's confidence evaporated. He attempted to maintain composure. Failed. The lead investigator approached the stage. "Richard Kane?" The room became completely silent. "Yes, we need to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation." Richard laughed nervously. "There must be some misunderstanding." The investigator didn't smile. "There isn't." The giant screens continued displaying evidence, more documents, more records, more signatures. The audience watched in stunned disbelief. Board members stared at one another. Investors looked horrified. Journalists practically vibrated with excitement. Maya remained seated. She felt no joy, no celebration, only satisfaction. Truth was finally visible. Richard looked toward the executive section. Nobody rushed to help him. Nobody defended him. The people who had applauded him minutes earlier suddenly discovered urgent interest in avoiding eye contact. One board member stood. "Richard, what exactly are we looking at?" His answer never came, because another screen appeared. This one showed project development records, original timestamps, original authorship, original documentation. Maya's name filled the screen, again and again and again. Every major milestone belonged to her, every innovation, every strategic decision, every breakthrough. The evidence was overwhelming. The room slowly turned toward Maya. People recognized her. Whispers spread. Richard followed their gaze. Their eyes met across the ballroom. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. Not worried, not uncomfortable, afraid. The investigator stepped closer. "You'll need to come with us." Richard's face reddened. "This is ridiculous." "No." The investigator gestured toward the screens. "This is documented." Security personnel approached. The same company's security department that had escorted Maya from the building. The irony wasn't lost on her. Richard attempted one final defense. "She fabricated this." The statement died immediately. Another voice interrupted. Helen Foster rose from her seat. Former board member, respected industry figure, impossible to dismiss. "No," she said clearly. "I verified much of it personally." The room grew even quieter. Richard stared at her. Then Ethan stood. Then 3 former employees, then another, then another. One by one, people began speaking. Stories emerged. Patterns emerged. Years of misconduct surfaced in minutes. Richard had spent his career convincing victims they were isolated. Now they stood together. His greatest advantage disappeared. The board chairman rose slowly. His expression carried equal parts anger and embarrassment. "How much of this is true?" Nobody answered, because the documents already had. Within minutes, the keynote presentation ended. Not with applause, not with celebration, but with investigators escorting Richard off stage. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Journalists raced for statements. Investors demanded explanations. Chaos consumed the summit. Maya remained seated. Ethan looked at her. "You okay?" She considered the question carefully. "Yes." "You don't look happy." "I didn't do this to feel happy." He nodded. That made sense. Revenge rarely looked like movies. It wasn't fireworks and victory speeches. It was accountability. It was consequences. It was truth arriving after a long delay. As Richard disappeared through a side exit, he turned once more. His eyes found Maya. The expression on his face had changed completely. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the superiority. Gone was the certainty. For years, he had controlled other people's futures. Now he couldn't control his own. 3 weeks later, Vantage Dynamics looked like a different company. Investigations expanded rapidly. Additional evidence surfaced daily. Several executives resigned. Others faced disciplinary action. The board launched an independent review. Shareholders demanded reform. News outlets covered the scandal continuously. Richard Kane became the center of every headline. His reputation collapsed almost overnight. The criminal investigation continued. Civil lawsuits followed. Former employees emerged from everywhere. People Richard had exploited for years finally felt safe enough to speak. Each new testimony strengthened the case. Each revelation exposed another layer. Meanwhile, Maya experienced something unexpected. Peace, not immediately. The first week felt surreal. The second felt exhausting. By the third week, the anger that had fueled her began fading. She realized she no longer checked news updates every hour. She no longer imagined confrontations. She no longer replayed the humiliation ceremony in her mind. The wound was healing. One afternoon, she received a phone call. The board chairman, the same man who had applauded Richard. "Would you meet with us?" Maya almost laughed. "Why?" "We owe you an apology." She accepted. The meeting occurred inside the company's headquarters, the same building that had once escorted her out. This time, everyone stood when she entered. Board members greeted her respectfully. The chairman spoke first. "We failed you," Maya said nothing. "We believed the wrong person." Still, she remained silent. "We can't change what happened." "No, we'd like an opportunity to make it right." The chairman slid a folder across the table. Maya opened it. Inside was an employment offer, not analyst, not manager, not director. Executive Vice President of Innovation. She stared at the document. For several moments, nobody spoke. Finally, she closed the folder. "Why me?" one board member answered. "Because the company needs someone who actually built something." Another added, "And because integrity matters more than image." Months earlier, those words might have sounded hypocritical. Now they sounded sincere. People learned differently when consequences became personal. Maya took the offer home. She spent days considering it. Part of her wanted a fresh start somewhere else. Another part understood something important. Walking away would be easier. Staying would matter more. Eventually, she accepted. The announcement generated significant attention. Employees celebrated. Former colleagues congratulated her. People who once ignored her suddenly praised her leadership. She appreciated the support. But she never forgot who stood beside her when things were difficult. Ethan became Chief Technology Officer. Helen joined an advisory committee. Several former employees returned to leadership positions. Slowly, the culture began changing. Transparency replaced secrecy. Credit returned to the people who earned it. Innovation improved. Morale improved. Trust improved. The transformation wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is, but it was real. Almost a year later, Maya stood backstage before another company ceremony. This time, she was the keynote speaker. Thousands attended. Employees from around the world watched online. The master of ceremonies introduced her. Applause filled the auditorium. As she walked onto the stage, memories surfaced. The humiliation, the betrayal, the rage. For a moment, she saw the past clearly. Then she looked at the audience. This audience felt different, because she wasn't standing there due to manipulation. She wasn't standing there because someone handed her credit. She stood there because she had earned the position. The applause eventually faded. Maya approached the microphone. She smiled. Then she said something nobody expected. "Success isn't measured by how high you climb." The room listened carefully. "It's measured by what remains true when someone tries to take everything away." Silence filled the auditorium. "Some people believe power means controlling others." She paused. "They're wrong." The audience remained captivated. Real power is knowing who you are, even when the world believes a lie. Applause began slowly, then grew louder, then louder still. Maya smiled, not because she had won, not because Richard had lost, but because she finally understood something revenge alone could never teach. The people who tried to destroy her had given her an unexpected gift. They revealed exactly who they were. And in fighting back, she discovered exactly who she was. The woman they tried to embarrass. The woman they tried to silence. The woman they tried to erase. Had become the one person they could never defeat. And that truth would outlive every lie they had ever told.